Hi, Jonathan. Thanks very much for taking time to speak with us here at Securities Lending Times. And to delve straight in, you're warning firms at the moment that are preparing for SFTR reporting that they need to be careful that their reports aren't valid but wrong. What do you mean by this?
So we're finding very often that firms are able to populate their SFTR reports, and indeed other sort of transactional reporting regimes, with fields that are correct in terms of the syntax, but are ultimately incorrect. So we have what we refer to as the valid but wrong problem. Very often this is down to an incorrect interpretation of the regulation, or it can be down to insufficient business analysis at the kind of scoping stage of the project. It can be down to poor data sourcing, potentially stale data points that don't have owners or data guardians, and what we'd refer to as sort of eureka moments during the project, whereby you have quite an obscure field that's mandatory under the ESMA rules, but firms are struggling to identify where to source it from. Then one of the analysts comes across something that meets the syntax requirements somewhere in the booking systems or the risk management systems, and simply uses that value because it appears to meet the specification whilst being an incorrect value.
What specific controls should firms have in place around their SFTR reporting?
So as a firm that's sole focus is on improving the quality of reporting across the industry, we're very keen on implementing training at firms prior to really commencing the project in earnest, and thinking about things like controls frameworks. So ensuring that there is adequate documentation and governance around the project, around the go live reporting delivery. In terms of the controls that we recommend beyond the training and controls frameworks, we have a significant focus on accuracy testing. So this is applying around sort of 400 plus tests in relation to every field within the report, going a long way beyond the validation rules, and essentially applying business knowledge and experience, and some sanity checking, and some negative testing, whereby you might expect to see values within the file that don't in fact exist, and then generating a whole series of queries and errors in relation to the reports, and feeding those back to clients for them to action. These should be supplemented with advanced reconciliations, whereby you have a party such as Kaizen Reporting taking an independent review of your reports, creating the reports based on their own sourcing of your data, and then reconciling those fresh reports against the reports you've actually submitted to the trade repository. Furthermore, you need to have controls in place around your reference data, and essentially constantly keep your reference data providers and vendors on their toes in terms of independently checking the quality of that data that you're receiving.
Okay, so what would you say are the top 3 things that firms should be focused on currently?
Rather like COVID-19, we'd absolutely start with testing, and more testing. It's fair to say that whilst you need to have an adequate SIT and UAT process in place, and that this needs to be fully documented and working internally, you should then essentially move that testing out to ensuring that you pass the trade repository validations, that ideally you employ an independent party to independently review the quality, completeness and accuracy of your reports. You then test across the industry and with your counterparties. You ensure that all of the reports that should be fed from the various market infrastructures, whether this is CCPs or tri-party agents or agent lenders, is feeding correctly, and ensuring that this testing continues across the industry. So very much as much testing as is possible in this pre-go live phase. We've obviously had a bit of an extension for the banks, and that time should be used to the maximum. Then very much ensuring that you secondly, put the correct controls in place. So very often we find that controls are very much a day 2 delivery, But with the 3-month extension in the go live for the reporting requirement, that excuse has really gone. So you should be making sure that you have procedures in place for all of your reporting, that you have a SFTR reporting policy, that all of the decisions that have been made around how the regulation has been interpreted are all documented, and that you have a testing plan and a reconciliation plan internally that you can follow. Furthermore, you need adequate management information around the completeness, accuracy, and timeliness of your reporting, and ensuring that you're capturing the trade repository receipts, the reconciliation breaks, and the closure of those breaks at the TRs. Finally, we would advocate that you don't attempt to mark your own homework. So having some independent quality assurance through regulatory testing will ensure that you're not only interpreting the regulation correctly, all of the regulatory technical standards, the implementation technical standards, the guidelines, and any updates, and furthermore that you cover off on the regression testing requirements, whereby as your business evolves, as the regulation evolves, as you make system changes, that you don't then break your reporting following any particular change.
You mentioned the delay due to COVID-19 that we've already seen. So we've got this one delay in place. Do you think we'll see another?
To be honest, I think that ship has now sailed. There's really two factors around this thought. Firstly, ESMA announced on the 6th of May that they had extended the license to 4 trade repositories to cover off on SFTR reporting effective on the 7th of May, so that's already in place, and which was very much the mechanism that they used in order to implement the initial technical delay from the April delivery. And secondly, whilst there are a number of banks that essentially, especially smaller organisations, that are still complaining around lack of time, lack of resources, difficulty in commencing and continuing with their testing during a lockdown, they don't feel that they've got sufficient empirical evidence to really support a new claim for a further extension without some external shock like COVID-19. So there's been sort of little appetite for any further appeals for an extension, and certainly the sort of undertones from ESMA are that this regulation has now been 4.5 years in coming from when it was first published, and it's very much time for it to go live.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for keeping us up to date with the SFTR requirements, your advice, and the impending July 13th deadline that's coming up. So thank you very much.